right, so I know I've asked a ton of questions. I don't know if there's like anything like you've been thinking about or you want to bring up at all as we're like going through Hispanic Heritage Month, which officially started yesterday. I know a lot of people can be confused as to like, why does it start from September 15th to October 15th? And because there's many countries within Latin America whose Independence Days have taken place throughout that span, right? So it doesn't follow like a traditional month, but it's still 30 days, right? It's still there. I don't know. So I did a little education nugget for some folks, although I think you probably knew that already.
What made you decide to actually have this event or just like conversation with us, and what inspired you to like basically share the story with?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the first conversations I had with folks in the front office is I know the population in North Carolina has a pretty strong Latino community here, and so I felt it was important that they knew there were Latinas on the team, associated with the team. So that was like the number one thing. It's like I think that's a huge opportunity for our club to grow as a fan base, or our league to grow as a fan base. So it was one, and I think if I understood, I think maybe you were the catalyst for some of this conversation.
Yeah, a little bit. I just I'm very grateful because a lot of the front office people and people on the team, like with media and everything, are very open to letting the players like share their stories and have a voice. So it's a lot of credit to them for allowing us to have this space to do this. But yeah, obviously I already knew of you before that and got to know you a little bit. So yeah, it just kind of worked out perfectly to get you to be here and have these conversations.
Yeah. And I think like you brought up Maria Sanchez, who's obviously a well-known Mexican player, and she's in Houston. So like the connection there is, I think, a little bit more obvious. When you think about North Carolina, people don't think about Latinos in the state, but they are here. In fact, I'm going to say that one of the reasons that Charlotte FC has a club in MLS is because of the Latino population in North Carolina. It's a long story, but I feel pretty strongly that was a litmus test to whether or not an MLS club should be in North Carolina, because the Latino population in the state is very strong. So I had, so that was top of mind. So around us is some music. I don't know if you've got any favorites. I mean, if you're talking about Latino culture, you kind of have to talk about music, I feel. I think food is an obvious one, but we can talk about food, though. We can. Actually, I probably want to. But I don't know, you got any favorite, like, songs from Latino artists? They don't have to be in Spanish. They could be in English.
Yeah, I think, like, the obvious answer, especially, like, nowadays, is, like, Bad Bunny, like, reggaeton and all that. But it's funny because like recently with going to camps and everything, you get like banda, like real like Mexican music. And I've actually been like so into it lately. And my dad, like I've been in the car like with when they visit, like with my mom, and we're just like having the best time. My dad hears it and he's like, I don't know what that is. He is not there for it. But yeah, that's been really cool to kind of like learn a new genre in Spanish.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
No, it's totally fun. It is a lot of fun. And we'll get back to Bad Bunny. Yeah. Is there anybody in your playlist that you're like?
You can ask my parents. I have a wide range of music that I listen to, from like pop, EDM, all of those different. But I'm more of like a beat person. Okay. And so whenever I hear good beats, hips don't lie. Like,
oh my God.
Just dance on the flow, the end of a song, or like me and my mom would like finish the end of the movie, and it's like that good song that comes on. You just can't help yourself even dance. But I think it's always just like the dancing portion of it, not necessarily the music. But just feeling the rhythm, in your body and just letting it go.
So I think you hinted at Shakira. So Shakira is Colombian and Lebanese, right? So there's a lot of like dual identities here. So whenever people are like Puerto Rican, Palestinian, I'm like, yeah, I'm Shakira's cousin. Like that's how I describe myself. I don't have any talent or any of that, but that it kind of clicks after I say something like that. They're like, oh, okay. Like I remember, Ricky Martin going to his concerts at like 15, or Enrique Iglesias before he kind of went mainstream, 15. But any song in Spanish, usually a salsa, could be a reggaeton. Anytime there's a song that mentions every flag coming out of Latin America, I'm here for it. Those are my favorites. So like one good one is
Gozadera.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Gozadera.
Yeah.
So that's Mark Anthony and Gente de Zona.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like my favorite. And it's like, you can't help but feel good when you listen to that song, right? I just got goosebumps. So I did share, I was like, oh, it'd be great if we could dance, but now it feels like a little too performative. So we're not going to do that today.
Yeah,
but
we won't do that.
Yeah, we won't do that. It crossed my mind because you're talking about like when you hear the beat, you're just like, you can't help it. But there's this like John Mayer had some skit with this comedian about, you know, when like the types of music different cultures, different people from different ethnicities would like, you know, and it's usually like a piano with like a conga drum, and it's like all the Latinos like, yeah, you know. So I completely, what you said about like the music moving you, I totally got that. Yeah. But yeah, I did go see Bad Bunny in March.
Oh, lucky.
In Brooklyn, and I know it's not the Bronx, but it was phenomenal, just really, really good energy. And I will, which you brought up the Bronx, so I know that's where your dad's from, so he's basically Puerto Rican. Just kidding. He's African American. But I moved to New York City. We don't have to talk about the year. I moved to New York City, and I had family that lived in the Bronx. And so I'm from Chicago. I'm a South Sider. It's a big city, so I'm thinking, whatever, I can handle the Bronx, right? And I get to my aunt's place, and it's in a big ass apartment building. And I get there literally the first night, and I go to the room because I'm only gonna stay there for a month until I can move into my my official apartment. And so I'm like unpacking my clothes, and I literally hear salsa playing. I'm like, all right, we're in the Bronx, salsa's playing. I look out the window, people dancing in the balcony, salsa, and every window had Puerto Rican flags. I'm like, this is such a stereotype, but it's so true with Puerto Ricans and their flags. So anyway, that was like Bronx story. It's like a very like pleasant memory, a very fond memory of being in New York. And like in that moment, I felt super Puerto Rican. Like even though I grew up in a Mexican neighborhood and mostly had the Arab side, the Palestinian side of the influence, but like, and I was born in Puerto Rico, by the way, but we moved here when I was young, which is a whole that's like another story. Maybe I talked to your mom about that one. Yeah. But yeah, I felt super Puerto Rican. Growing up, there's a lot of insecurity when you're like the only one, right? And you're not like other people or around. I would say for me, there was maybe two moments. There's probably several moments, but like I've got several memories. Some of them not great. Like there was this one, I remember being in college, first year, and I was in the bathroom it could have been like Latino night or something like that, right? That our organization was hosting and whatever. And so it was a great party, of course. And so I go to the bathroom, and there is this white woman there, and she was like, oh, where are you from or something like that. I'm like, oh, I'm Puerto Rican. She's like, oh, that's where I live too. And she said something, and she was like, oh, I'm more Puerto Rican than you. And I was like, stunned. And so that really felt horrible, right? And yeah, she had lived there, but I think her dad was some executive at a company that had moved to Puerto Rico or something like that. And so like, I was like, but I was like silenced. Like I just couldn't. So I was like, And I think that, that was one, like, no, she doesn't get to say that, so like one kind of moment. I grew up, certainly, my first language was Spanish, but I wasn't, I moved to the States, and so to acclimate, my parents started speaking more English, and we were like, going around. Anyway, and I never took Spanish. Like I took French for whatever reason, and specifically started working with the Mexican national team, and everything was in Spanish, and so I felt self-conscious that my grammar wasn't perfect, right? But then I had a coworker who was Russian, and he was like, fake it till you make it. Like that's like that's his whole stuff. He wasn't fluent, but like he sounded so confident. I was like, what the hell, And nobody questioned that. So I think part of it was like, no, like this, I'm Puerto Rican enough. Like I'm, or I'm Latina enough, or, so whenever I hear somebody say, oh, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico. If you don't speak Spanish, they're like, oh, you're not Puerto Rican. It's like, that's dumb. Like, that's not true. Like, yeah, I am. Like, these are where my roots are from. I would say that the Puerto Rican, when I started thinking about being, either more Puerto Rican or really like absorbing, that identity more, I think part of it is like certainly college, when you're more aware and like you said, you're out of like your element, and so you're, I think that also that age is like when you're thinking about who you are, right? You're growing as a person, being around more, well, actually growing up it was mostly Latina, but other Puerto Ricans. Most of my friends were Mexican, right? Like my best friend since I've been 4 years old. You know, that whole family is Mexican. That's what I know. But meeting other Puerto Ricans, I actually met in college another Puerto Rican Palestinian, and I was like, what? Like, how is there another? You know, like it was so great. And so like being able to talk about that, I didn't start learning how to salsa until I got to college, right? And like dance is like really big, right? And so you want to fit at least that stereotype that you can dance well. And so surrounding, you know, I think that I started getting like really, I can be nerdy, and so I started reading about colonialism in Puerto Rico, and like there's this whole issue around statehood versus independence versus remaining a commonwealth, and you know, I read that and I came out like super militant, like independence Puerto Rican. Whenever I would go to Puerto Rico every few years, not every summer. We'd alternate between Palestine or Puerto Rico, and we didn't go every year either, you know, just since we were also a big family and couldn't afford to fly everybody all the time. But just whenever I go and having, you know, the family like welcome you, talk about my abuela, and like you feel a part of it. So there's lots of different moments. Maybe the defining one was like the Bronx story. Like I'm really Puerto Rican, you know, here. And so I don't know. I think it's a lot of different like moments that I'm in.
Well, I think there's just a lot for me to learn in general, not just about like my Mexican heritage, but a lot of Latino heritage and just history. And I think as we continue to have these events, there's like nuggets that you gave in with information that you continue to learn. And hopefully, like you said, when you finally identified as Puerto Rican, you dived into that scenario. And then I think that also helps the situation. So I can't like answer that one, but I think it's always a continuous learning form. And it's good to not just learn yourself, but others in order to understand the world around you. So I think there's no one piece that I've discovered.
I've been in organizations in college and post-college related to our community. There's still a ton. Like, I mean, there's dozens of countries, right, throughout Latin America. And even though I've traveled to some of them, even from a language perspective, there's different words that you say in Mexico that we say in Puerto Rico, even though I say them as a Mexican, because that's where I grew up. Like, I go to Puerto Rico and my aunt's like, you sound like a Mexican. I'm like, I know, I'm cool with that. That works, right? So even from a language perspective, my mom is a Spanish translator, and she's traveled to a bunch of Latin American countries, and she gave me this book because I was like, what the heck are they saying? Like, I understand the words in Spanish, but there's so many expressions that I'm not grasping, you know? And so I don't know if I'm not going to say them because I'm probably going to mess them all up. But just think of like the expressions we say in English, and like there's like probably 25 of those in Spanish. All just, you know, and they all mean like different things depending on where you're coming from.
There's things that I would say in Ecuador that are just like people just like literally, even though you're speaking the same language, they have no idea what you're talking about. And I think actually something that like brings to my mind is like in school, I always actually didn't do very well in Spanish classes because the way that I grew up learning Spanish is not the Spanish that they teach in school.
Right.
And I would get picked apart on like my tests, on my papers, and I was fluent in Spanish. And like a lot of other kids weren't, but they were doing better than me because the dialect and like the curriculum was different. And for me, like the things that they would say to me, which like you kind of don't realize until you look back on it, is just like kind of inappropriate. It's like saying that, you know, the things that I'm saying are improper, or the way that I'm saying it, or the way that I'm punctuating, or things like that aren't right, or that my grammar isn't correct. But it's not the grammar, it's the dialect. Like it's just how I grew up. And like if I was talking to a Mexican person, it would be 100% fine and there would be no issues, or writing a letter or anything. But when you are kind of just forcing this like one way of Spanish, which I'm sure is Spain, I'm not sure, but
of course, right?
Then it's just they're telling you you're not doing something correctly that you grew up knowing, and you know, you'll get like a baseball coach as your Spanish teacher.
Right.
Something like
and
that.
And you're like, excuse me? You just mentioned, actually, I think recently, I want to say one of the University of California schools created a whole curriculum around Spanish for like native speakers as a result of that, right? Because what you were saying is that, you know, was 100% correct, but because this other person who probably wasn't a Spanish speaker, a native Spanish speaker, they learned it a certain way that's where it netted out, and you're just like, you're right. Oh yeah, you're not the first person I've heard who's Latino and speaks Spanish to like share a story like that, and it's bonkers. It
tough.
doesn't make any sense at all, like any. Yeah. Well, So have you? Okay, so we're in North Carolina. We talked about the growth of the population in North Carolina with Latinos. Like, have you any places in North Carolina that you visited? I mean, we're here at a nice Mexican Colombian restaurant, which is pretty cool. I actually am looking at the lucha libre masks, and we actually grew up going to see them fight. This was like before we knew WWE existed. We'd see lucha libre, so this has like really fond memories. Of like where I grew up. But I don't know, any pockets, you know, since you've been here that you've been able to explore, or is that something? I know you're both recently new to this state.
Yeah. We don't have much free
Yeah.
time.
Okay, just kidding. All right, we take that
So
one.
that we can ask the fans.
Yeah.
If they can share little pockets.
Yeah.
That they find.
The NFL was trying to acknowledge Hispanic Heritage Month, and they threw just like, just the accent over the N and just kind of called it Latin spice or something to the league in an effort to acknowledge Hispanic Heritage Month. But the first problem that I had with it was that it just wasn't correct. Like putting that, like it's the National Football League, and when you put it over the N, it completely changes the word, and it's just not a word. It doesn't like make the word in Spanish. It doesn't do anything to the word other than make it incorrect.
At least for me, the irony was for Wednesday night's game, congratulations. Let's see the win. They had, you know, they broadcasted, you know, with the graphic top goal scorers in the league. And your name was on the list, and I was, of course, happy to see that. But they put the wrong accent mark over the N in your name. And I was like, ugh. And so I tweeted about it, and I was like, hey, you know, tomorrow's first day of Hispanic Heritage Month. Can we please correct this before then? I was trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice on Twitter because I can be angry on Twitter. So I made that comment, and I was like, oh, you know, we love our tildes, and I put a bunch of the symbols around the ñ. And so that was like Wednesday night, and then the next morning, the NFL posts their, you know, reimagined logo, and I just responded, no, not like this. We don't love the tildes like this. But you know, within at least. So I'm in the sports business world. I've got a lot of Latino friends in the sports business world, and people were like, "This is like the common," and this was your response too, like, "This is so bad," and that was like what I kept seeing over and over and over again. I also had friends who are Caucasian, you know, who used to work at the NFL, and they're like, "This is really bad." Like they were also aware, and we just all kind of had a good laugh about it. Like, this is so bad, and. There was there was a really great response to the NFL's logo where somebody took a clip from The Office, a TV show, where the character Ryan, I don't know what day it is in The Office, but maybe around Hispanic Heritage Month, and he takes this bottle of lemonade and he puts the tilde over the N, and he's like, I don't know, right? And that is
Spanish lemonade, Mexican lemonade.
Yeah, and there's like accent over the E, which you can't really see, so it's like lemonade or something like that instead. Anyway, I wasn't even mad. I just kept laughing. Like, it was a great day. Like, I'm in this group called Latinx in Sports, and the group chat was out of control.
Can only imagine.
Did you see it?
No.
Oh, we'll have to send it to you.
Yeah, I need to go on my phone now.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I don't know, you know, being both Latina and Black, right? It's like, okay, I can appreciate the effort. I want to appreciate the effort. I want to. But I have to, like...
You have to call them out.
Yeah. So...
I just think they're too big and have too many resources to make a mistake like that. Or to do something that's just not well enough thought through, or put through enough people that have the knowledge of like how to do something like that in the correct way, that it's just a failure. For such a big league and one that represents, you know, a lot of minority groups. It's just
no, that's actually a fair point. And when I think about that, then I'm getting more serious. Like, that's pretty disrespectful.
There still needs to be a communication and kind of that connection. Be like, okay, what can we do here to learn, to connect? What can we like help with? And I think that will help with the future. And once like teams and leagues start diversifying more, there's more to talk about. There's more connections that need to be made. in order to progress as a team, a sport in general, because we're probably the most popular sport in the world, but here not everyone knows that, and so we have to continue to educate and like share our heritage in order for them to understand the importance of what we do on a day-to-day basis.
I think it's really important for, I mean, just people in general to see people in their whole selves, right? And you never know what like jewels and nuggets are going to come out of like knowing where people are coming, you know, where people come from. You can make assumptions based on people look, how they talk, whatever. But I think, you know, this fan base is growing. It's becoming more diverse. The players, as we see, are becoming more diverse. And so, you know, as a league, as a club, like you've got to embrace that. The communities that these markets are growing and also diverse, right? You've got new clubs, LA, San Diego, hello, like California's like 50% Mexican, right? So I think they are paying attention to that, which is great. But I think somebody's thinking about North Carolina, you're thinking, oh, maybe Latinos aren't here, right? But they are, and you know, you're just either not putting yourself out there and making or having the intention to find out who's in your community, which is really huge. For me, it's you know, that's the growth of the league. That's the growth of the business. Like the seat I'm in, I don't play, but for me, as much as like it's personally important to me, right? Like I'm super proud of being Latina. You know, if I take off like, you know, the heart, you know, on my shoulder, you know, personality, and I put on my business hat, it's like, this is a growth, like pure and simple. This is why brands are investing in the Latino community. It's now, after the 2020 census, I think we're, I don't know, 18% of the US population. And by the way, this stat, which I thought was interesting, of that, I believe 10% are Afro-Latina or Afro-Latino in the US, which I was like, I mean, the numbers are there, right? But people may assume like, oh, you know, you are just this one thing. And you're like, no. Kiki's a multitude of things, right? And so for me, it's one, I think it's just a sign of respect to acknowledge these different communities within the soccer space. But two, it's the growth of literally like the business of soccer, which is important just for the growth of soccer as a sport. So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Bringing in more diverse players and not being afraid to like branch out. And you know, soccer is a sport that is played all around the world. Yeah. So there's so many people that are extremely talented and just need opportunities. And I think if we branch out a little more, which I have seen, and I would give credit to the league, that especially even in our team, we've had so many international signings. And I think the coolest thing for me is like when someone comes from a new place, you start to get fans of that place. Like I'm not, to my knowledge, was there, you know, a lot of Mexican fans at Courage games, and it's really cool to see, like, even in the beginning of the season till now, when they had like all the flags hanging up behind the goal, they recently added a Mexico flag, so I thought that was like really cool. In just my time here, I've seen that. And you know, we have Fuka here now, and there's like more Japanese people coming to the games, and I think just things like that are really cool to see.
But I'm excited to spend this time with you, and I'm so glad you're part of the Courage, and thanks for letting me be here and having
Thanks for chatting with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah. This was fun.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.